This is Lakhi Singh, the Property and Business Fixer, coming to you live on Friday. I hope you're all well, enjoying the whole week of freedom. This is actually Freedom Week, I believe. I've got a special guest on today, Ninder Singh. Unfortunately, we've got a slight issue with his camera, but he is here live, as you cannot see, but you will hear in a second. So welcome. Good morning, Ninder Singh ji.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Sat Sri Akal. First week of freedom. Well, that'd be interesting to chat about.
So I think we've got quite a big topic in store, and it will be good to get a take from Ninder Singh really about my chair's broken. I think I must have put on too much muscle, or or maybe too many laddus. So big question this week is obviously we've had the Freedom Day, and now we're in a position where everything's opening up again, and there's lots of new rules about what's allowed, and pretty much all the restrictions have been taken off. But we are going to go into all the details. I have actually followed it up to a point, but as I'm not actually quite in the events industry, quite like Ninder Singh is, I'm sure he's going to fill us in on all the details.
I'm a bit like you myself. I'm not really in the meds industry, but we'll have a bash.
Slow as well, actually. That's kind of strange. Okay, so good morning to all our viewers. We've got lots of shout outs from different platforms, from Barhan Noor, we've got John Smith, Noman, we've got Rona here as well. So good morning to all of you. They're not coming across on this platform, but I can see it on a couple of other platforms because we're going live across LinkedIn. Well, not LinkedIn actually yet, but YouTube, Instagram, as well as Twitter and Facebook, into the Alternative Business Solutions community, which is a brand new group that we've set up now. So before further ado, Ninder Singh, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, fine. It's sunny. It's been sunny all week, which sort of is synonymous with Freedom Week. With regard to your comments about where we are medically, I think it's all up in the air, isn't it? I'm no medic person myself, but yeah, it's a mixed story out there. But I shall tell you what I think.
Okay, well, we'll come on to all of that in a second. So just to give everybody a quick heads up, we are actually in quite a uncertain stage, I think, because there's lots of negative press about the pandemic, or being called the pingdemic now, is actually because of I think it's because of the NHS app that's there. It's called Pingdemic. And what is a pingdemic? What's the definition? And just in case I misunderstood it, I've not really quite followed what the pingdemic is compared to what the pandemic is.
Okay, so of course, I think most of us, including me, have the NHS app. And of course, if you come into contact with someone that has registered positive for coronavirus, then the app, by tracking your movements, knows that you were in the vicinity of that person, and then will send you a ping on your NHS app and say you now have to self-isolate. My understanding was 600,000 people, I think just yesterday, received a ping. So 600,000 people are self-isolating at home. That's 600 people that have been taken out of the workplace, including drivers, lorry drivers, which explains why there's a bit of a panic over potentially empty shelves. Other people who might be double vaccinated and probably haven't or have had coronavirus. The system does not discriminate between that. It just accepts everybody the same. So it could be that you're self-isolating at home, you're double vaxxed, and you don't have it, and other people who are not double vaxxed may also not have it. So you're from a productivity perspective, the nation has most of it. So 600,000 people sitting at home, not contributing towards the economy, but causing real problems in businesses being able to deliver their services.
Wow, that's. I mean, I have actually been following it up to a point. I've been following snippets of news about empty shelves, but I didn't quite understand why that was, and how this is all becoming a little bit of somewhat semi-crisis for a lot of
Well,
businesses.
well,
Uh,
if it's not even that. Just think of the public services. So you may not get your bins picked up. You may not get your mail delivered on time. Maybe it's going to be 4 or 5 days late. So the whole system of the way the UK works economically and from a public sector perspective is slowly grinding to a halt because of this app. And of course, some people are saying the app is far too sensitive. And if I remember, 16th of August is when they're going to change the rules and say if you're double vaccinated and you get pinged, then you don't have to follow the isolation sort of strategy. But then, of course,
I
people are
think
saying,
that's
well,
the argument that's being played out at the moment,
yeah,
but I don't
but,
think the
but
government's quite thought that argument through and not worked out really the sort of almost the flow of things in terms of what's going to happen, and sort of done some sort of predictive analysis of really what could happen and really how they should go about tackling the micro issues that come out of it. But obviously, the micro issues are somewhat fundamental to the runnings of an economy and a day-to-day living in a developed country. So it's now obviously being felt by everybody up to a point, because they're used to their let's just say they're used to the system sort of working. But I will make another point, though. I think it's only affected for people on at a certain level across the industry. But a certain industry, for example, solicitors and accountants that require maybe a lot of work that needs to be done from home or can be done in an office anyway. If they have been pinged, I think the impact's going to be a lot less in some ways because they're probably working from home anyway. Would you agree? Or
yeah. And I think what they're trying to now do is try and put down a list or compile a list of, it's a bit like your key workers, really, the people who, if they get pinged and double vaxxed, don't have to follow the instructions. And of course, the other argument is if you're going to abandon the system on the 16th of August, why not abandon it now? Why wait? So, yeah, you're right. For those who it's not crucial to be in the office, for them, it's not so bad. But we don't know what those figures are. But there's some of the key workers, the people who make the infrastructure of the UK run, and that's where the problems lie.
well, I suppose it could also be a self. I suppose as a country could actually make the situation worse, because what about key workers in the NHS or a sort of more essential services in the police or in the fire brigade, ambulance service? You know, the 3 or 4 key essential services, you could call them. If they're impacted in the same way and they have to isolate, I mean, that could also have a devastating effect in terms of increasing the pandemic, because people aren't going to be treated. They can't be taken to hospital easily. They can't be treated easily. And so things could also worsen if you've got even a 5 or 10% drop in that type of employment. Would you agree? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the whole. That's why they've now turned it the pandemic, because of everything you've just said, and all the implications that arise from such a problem. So yeah, it's an ever-moving, fast-moving beast, and it's very difficult to plan and predict, and that's why it's something that's uppermost in the agenda now.
Okay, let's move on to, so we've understood a little bit of the dynamics of what's happening with the pandemic for anybody who may not have been following it fully. But I think most people are probably aware, what's happening with the pandemic, the pingdemic, and how it's pretty much a completely different way of life. Actually, it is somewhat Big Brother-like at the moment. So, tell us more about what you think's going to happen in the events industry. What's your take? I think the floor is yours now, because I think you probably got to explain it to me in a systematic way. I'm going to let you take the floor for 5-10 minutes. Give me a brief about what your plans are, first of all, with your events now. And are you going to be going ahead, first of all? I think let's just start with that one.
Yep. So we have our first date penciled in for the 1st of October in Wolverhampton. And so we're going to start the publicity around that this week. Next week rather, coming up. We'll also be publicising the fact that November the 5th, we'll be holding our first London Signature Awards at the Hilton Park Lane. And then we'll move into Leicester and Birmingham next year, is how it's looking at the moment. In terms of the events itself, well, it's a mixed picture. You hear some people have taken the cautious approach and cancelled their impending events through July and August. I attended an event, about 150 people, a couple of days ago. Yeah, Wednesday. And people were very relaxed. There was no asking of your certificate to show you double vax. There was no request for lateral flow tests. There were no masks, and most people, it was like going back in time. It was like going back to an event pre-COVID. So there are certainly a percentage of people who are very reluctant to go out, and yet there's a percentage of people who just can't wait to get out. And I think,
tell us a little bit about the event. Where was it, and what was the nature of the event?
It was an awards afternoon. It was in a hotel in Birmingham called the Grand Hotel, and people were very relaxed, and it was that was quite refreshing to see. And of course, I'm assuming it's an assumption that everybody in the room was double vaxxed. I've no idea, but yeah, that was sort of the first one. I went to one in March. Was it March? No, it was. Yes, it was. It was in March. No, sorry, it was in June. And yeah, it was June, and that was. But
I've got a bit of problem with the line, so you continue.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now? Hello. Hi, Lakhi, can you hear me now? Lost him. Hi, Lakhi, can you hear me now? Oh, I'm back.
I can. I think I had a glitch with the
Yeah,
there's a bit of noise in the background, so I just thought I'd mute that out. Okay,
oh,
so
okay. Yeah,
so going back to the Birmingham bit, so that sounds really good. So the bigger question now is, I suppose, you've got an event coming up in the next coming months. What's your general thoughts in terms of, do you think that's definitely going to go ahead, or you think because of pandemic something's going to change, or what's your general forecast in terms of what's going to happen in the events industry in the next year?
I think up to September, October, I think we're going to be okay. I think it's whether, as some have predicted, that November could be awkward. And if November happens and they have to shut down or restrict movements, December, January is what they're saying. That's what some people are saying. That would be interesting to watch. But I think at some point, I have to agree, at some point, somewhere, we have to go back to where we were. Now, I've never been vaccinated for flu, ever. So every winter, I approach the flu season without a vaccination, but that hasn't stopped me going out. So I suppose the question is, you have two choices. You either stop going out totally, or you take this on and add it as one of your risks in life, just like you do when you get into a car. And of course, let's not forget, most winters we have about 25,000 deaths from flu anyway, which never get reported. So it's all about now where you are, where you want to place it. And with double vaccination and the link between hospitals and deaths been broken, So in other words, for the amount of infections, hospitalization is definitely down compared to before, and the number of deaths is appreciably down as well. So it has been broken. The link has been broken. We do have to be careful, but I think at some point, as the government said, we need to go back to life at some point and just accept it's part of our normal everyday life.
Wow. So what are the, well, I think let's just talk about the elephant in the room, which is that obviously it's a very, to call it, serious topic, people dying and the numbers that are dying in a chart. It almost seems a bit surreal when you look at the statistics and you see how many people are dying. Now, my guess is that obviously the statistics get any worse, either because the fallout from something like pandemic, if they do change things, and things get worse because they haven't made any decisions based upon a strong foundation, and then something happens 5 months down the line, or that obviously if the death toll increases, but again, if it's because of the flu aspect, because I think there's a lot of natural deaths during the flu season anyway. A lot of people possibly maybe suffer, anybody that's vulnerable or elderly, probably more likely to have some sort of infection or illness, or it's more likely to increase the possibility of death, I suppose. So putting those things aside, I think if based upon the pandemic itself, it getting any worse with the Delta variant coming in, those are the sort of hard-hitting questions, I suppose, that have got to be asked. And the likelihood, my guess is that if it's getting any worse globally and it's coming back into the country, then we could actually be seeing a lockdown for the foreseeable future. What's your thoughts?
Well, look, there was always a consensus of thought that unless the whole world gets vaccinated, this problem's not going to get away. And I think that's still true today, as it was when the vaccine was first introduced. And of course, the other problem, ever-present problem, will be that with this COVID around now, and nothing will get rid of it, there are always going to be variants going forward. And really is a question of how much risk as a society we are prepared to take. I think that's what it comes down to. And of course, there is the talk of an autumn jab. So in other words, sometimes like September, October, we get an additional jab to support the 2 jabs we've had today, because there may be evidence that the antibodies start to wane after a few months, and it might be that extra jab, might be the one that gets us through the winter. But I think we're beginning to realize now that this is something we're just going to have to live with. And it's just finding that balance between risk and letting the UK economy and UK society function. Because look, we at the outset of our conversation, we spoke about the whole infrastructure crumbling because of pandemic, and then you might get people dying who are not going to the hospital for their normal treatments. And so that's a figure we tend to forget to look at. Those people dying as a consequence of COVID, but not being infected by it.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to sort of second level gear in the topic, because I think topic around the pandemic is quite somber. It is real, but I mean, being the property and business fixer, I don't really want to be necessarily talking about what's happening. I think let's talk about what we can make happen, and what the solution is, and so that we keep it positive. So, based upon your estimations, you are going ahead with the event. So tell us a little bit more about the event. So, if anybody's watching that's actually interested in the event, who are you targeting, and how many people are attending? I think let's talk about the prospects now in terms of how you're going to be monetizing things in the time that you have got access to the public and the things aren't so constrained now. Because I think I actually went to see a nightclub owner yesterday, so they've opened up, and but they're saying that they're making more money now than they've ever made, because I think there's a pent up demand for people wanting to go out and a party. So that's obviously a different type of industry, because it's more nightclubs. But there's lots of similarities. So tell me more. What's the good news, and tell us a little bit more about your event.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. I think people are now beginning to realise that they do have to live with it, and they are now looking to grow their businesses through networking and informal meetings. So the word mass gathering is now taking sort of getting some kind of acceleration. You're meeting now regularly people you now meet up in restaurants and coffee takeaways, because now it's fine. And I think I personally think people are now, despite the numbers, are getting used to being out and about. So I don't foresee another lockdown, because I think more and more people are getting vaccinated. So from an events perspective, it's looking very promising. We're expecting a full house in Wolverhampton. And as I said, next week we're going to start promoting the London event. And really the event is for people to network, meet people they haven't seen for a year and a half. But more importantly, to meet new people and generate new revenues, new contacts and new networks. And the prices will be on the website. You'll see them next week, www.natural, which is NACHURAL.co.uk. So yeah, it's looking good. And of course, I was at an event last night celebrating the River and Canal Trust. And there's about 100 people in there. But again, people were quite open and converse to meeting each other. And one of the chaps I met there was the former CEO of Asda, Alan Layton, who'll be in my magazine featured in a future issue. And he'll be talking all about retail, business leadership. He wrote a really brilliant book recently. So yeah, that's the kind of people we're still now beginning to meet, because we're out and about. And that's the kind of thing that is difficult to do hidden behind.
Well, I'll be quite keen to come to your event. Hopefully VJ Sal can fly in as well. I think
that would be good on his helicopter.
His helicopter. I'll definitely be looking to come. I'll be looking to get some sort of VIP front row seat somewhere. But let's see. We'll have to talk. We'll have to do some negotiations in the back there, depending on the size of the ticket. What's the price of the ticket then?
So for the Wolverhampton one, it's £100 plus the VAT, and for the London one, it's £250 plus the VAT. Traditionally typical prices that you'd find for a top level networking event and awards night. And of course, we give out awards on the night as well, and we always have a great keynote speaker. And
fantastic. So who have you got lined up? Is it one of the hoteliers or?
No, interesting, because magazine that comes out end of this month, the front cover is actually of a hotelier, Surinder Arora. He's worth about 1.2 billion, and he's got a great story to tell. So and what you find with all these sort of really high net worth and high achieving individuals is they only see the positive, they don't see the negative. And I think part of me wanting to go ahead with events was to lead the way, is to say, look, we just have to take these things head on, just be reasonable and sensible, but you can still run a full life, particularly with the vaccination. So I'm going fully ahead, and we're going to set the date. Well, we've set the date for Birmingham already, and we're just going to set the date for Leicester over the weekend. So we're going full steam ahead, and the response we're getting so far is excellent. And so I think Wolverhampton will be sold out soon, and yet we haven't really even gone public with it.
Well, sounds amazing, actually. I think with that sort of price, presumably you're going to have the full work, starters, main course, desserts,
yeah, the full works, yeah. So
coffees, and you're going to get like a back massage and like also a bit of sauna. But, yeah, the full works, yeah.
Yeah, the full works. So we'll have the full works.
Okay, so that sounds pretty amazing, actually. So, anybody that's actually looking to go, do look up. If you can send us a bit more information when this video goes out, we can add it to the tags in there for you. Just send me all the tags, and then we'll get it all tagged up to this video as well. So that sounds fantastic, actually. So anybody that's interested in, is there limited tickets for these events, or
there will be. So I think for the Wolverhampton, with the first 500, then we'll shut shop, and likewise for London. And as I said, next week we start the promotion on it. All the marketing assets are ready, and we were just waiting for this week to go because it was Freedom Week. We just wanted everyone to get into that sort of rhythm now, and people are beginning to get into that rhythm now of saying, let's get out.
If you need any help from the Property Fixer, we've got over 100,000 followers across various platforms, so we're happy to put the word out through at least 6 or 7 of our key influencers that we work with as well.
Nice.
Across the sort of events industry. So it sounds fantastic. I think it's encouraging to know that events are going to be opening up again, and for what I'd say £250 is not a lot of money for people in that sort of industry who are looking to grow their businesses and network at that level. I've certainly paid those sort of prices and attended those sort of events in the past, and they've been pretty amazing events, actually. They're sort of events of a lifetime if you're not used to going to them or that sort of an environment. So will there be music and dancing as well, or?
Yeah. So it's all about the investment, as you said. It's investing in yourself, investing in your brand, investing in your business's brand, and unless you get out and about, then I always find the more you're out and about, the more you raise your profile. The more you mix with people that are better than you, people who achieve more than you, then I find more opportunities come knocking on your door than they would otherwise. And I think that's one of the things that, unfortunately, the last 18 months has been that people haven't been able to. It's a lot more difficult to generate new revenue streams when you're locked away in your office.
Well, I've probably got about at least 40 or 50 potential customers that will probably want to come because of my network, because where I work in Mayfair, all of them are quite aspirational or already well connected somewhat. So I can certainly put the word out and get the marketing out for you locally.
Wonderful. As I said, next week we'll start the marketing behind it, and I think we're expecting a full house at the Park Lane Hilton as well. So I think both.
I think it'll get sold out because I think you're going to have so much pent up demand for
That's right.
People wanting to spend money but having nowhere to spend it because they've just been at home trying to make beans and toast at home and that sort of thing. So they're probably so that sounds amazing, actually, that the events industry is opening up in that way. I think definitely sounds good. Do you?
But I think the sort of the sense was set and the sort of tone was set through the Euros. Really, if you think about how the Euros started with just a small audience, then it grew and grew and grew, and then people start to get used to it. And now actually, I mean, if you think about it, we take sitting outdoors as now normal. You can chat to anybody you want, and we're making those inroads into now inside. And as long as you take precautions, ventilation, and make sure that people are safe and secure, then I think there's nothing to stop us having a normal life like we used to.
I mean, what's going to be quite a good benchmark is you've got the Tokyo Games going on, Olympic Games. I think we need to probably watch that carefully because we're obviously UK. We know what we know, and we are within the confines of a strategy or a structure within, the NHS app, etc., and the vaccinations, etc. I'd be interested to know really how it plays out in a global sort of scale and in the one location where a lot of different individuals are participating in games. I think there might be sort of a lot lesser lessons to be learned actually, because what goes well there is probably certain things that you could be adopting in your events, and I think maybe in terms of things they're doing.
Well, it's difficult to compare for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they don't have an extensive vaccination program as we have had in the UK. That's one. Secondly, there's very few people attending in terms of spectators.
Okay.
But you are right in terms of the participants, the athletes. They come globally from all over the place, and that sort of lends to our argument earlier. This is only going to disappear, the virus, until the whole world has been vaccinated, and we can travel from one country to another without fear. And I think that's the bit we've got to get right. But certainly in this country, amongst others, Israel and a few others, we've got a great vaccination program, and we've not had to do what Australia have done, which is have a complete lockdown, because their vaccination process was really tiny. I think it's 12 or 20, something like 20% or something. It's a really low number. And as a result, they have to lock down regularly because they haven't done the vaccination. So a lot to learn from everybody, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably so many different aspects. I mean, Australia is a massive country with a lot smaller population.
Absolutely.
So there's probably different sort of situations around logistics and distribution, I would think, because you've got a lot more of a sparse population, haven't you? Okay, so going back, I mean, it'll be interesting to have your take on other events companies and what they should be doing. I mean, let's just take me as an example. I was actually looking to launch a regular event in Mayfair, get maybe 20, 30 people together in the Mayfair Hotel for drinks, talk about business, and do that sort of regularly every month. I'm still quite keen on doing something like that. So what's your thoughts and ideas on something like that? I suppose something like that can happen now anyway, because there's nothing stopping things like that happening. But I suppose it's just a question of continuity. I think if things change, then investing into something like that, especially if you book something in advance, or it's more about the commercial aspect, I suppose, in terms of any commercial payments you might make for a contract with for a regular place. What's your thoughts? What's your advice for anybody who's a budding events person looking to set up a small event, or has maybe already a large events player in the market? They organize maybe self-development courses, or they organize training courses for people in property. I mean, the property industries, there's at least 3 or 4 very large property training companies that I know personally as well, and I'm sure they've felt the pinch in terms of not being able to get their network together physically. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think what you said at the outset was correct, which is there are no restrictions. I think that size events of 20, 30 is very popular now. More and more of them are happening because, people feel a lot more relaxed with only 20, 30 people in the room. They're happening regularly now, so I don't think that's an issue. I suppose if you're long-term planning, there's a level still of uncertainty, although I've booked my dates. And I think as long as everybody in the supply chain understands that they need to be flexible should something unknown happen, then I think it's okay. And I think we just need to get back to normal now, and just be careful, take precautions, and and if you're not well, don't go out. If you haven't been double vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you do all these things, then eventually we'll be okay. But then it's how the rest of the world catches up. But if you're talking about at the local level, these things are happening regularly now. There's lots of events. I was at one last night, and there's about 100 people in Coventry. I told you I was the one on Wednesday, 150 people during the day, and people are now just going back to normal, really, and it's just slowly, step by step. So I'd say yes, go for it, 100%.
So chuck there for isn't it time? So that means like go for it. Okay, so lots and lots of potential there for anybody out there trying to get into events or do something, because at a smaller level, if you are organizing, a bit of a tip there, I suppose, for anybody out there, if you want to make your event sustainable, if you are doing smaller events for maybe 10, 20, 30 people, the likelihood of anything happening to them is lower now, or the risk is lower, because somewhat, I mean, if somebody found a clever way of actually organizing them outside in the open, but you've got, even if it rains, it's covered, but it's still, you can still do them. I suppose it's going to be almost impossible to close those ones down, because you've covered all the angles in terms of future-proofing it.
Absolutely. So I think you've nailed that one. So you can see, I mean, listen, we've only got to go back a year and a half and remember how restrictive everything was. I mean, you were told to stay at home, full stop. You couldn't leave. But now, you know, it's a case of get out and about, be positive, and lead from the front.
So I think the next big thing is going to be something called rooftop networking. So if you've got a rooftop hotel and it's open air, the risk of contamination is lower, whatever state the pandemic's at. Being in it, I suppose that's probably going to be let's just say more than a 95% chance that that's going to have a lot of longevity. Then I think even if you've got a large event with a massive room with a lot of let's just say air, the more air you have, the less enclosed it is, I suppose, the better it is in terms of the risk, if you're looking at it from an events point of view. So I think there's almost a bit of a PR around a COVID-19 safe environment type pitch to people coming to events as well. So look, it's COVID safe. We've followed the government's guidelines. We're also, ticking these 10 boxes ourselves, which to be more proactive. So I suppose the bigger question is going to be for a lot of event providers, whether they should be looking at when people come into their pub or their restaurant, what level of regulation they can put in. But I think it's all self-regulation at the moment. Is that right, Ninder?
Yeah, it's all self-regulation. It's now just managing people's confidence. And certain venues will pull in more people than other venues, and it just depends how sort of positive notes you put out there. And I think.
But what do you recommend to any other budding event owners or current event owners in terms of what's best practice? Well, I'm not going to put the question to you because obviously it's quite a personal thing in terms of your industry, what you do, how it works. But I'd rather put it to as a generic question. So what do you think would be the best practice that businesses should have put into place?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Our first event at Wolverhampton, there are some very large doors, so which means we'll get plenty of ventilation. We'll also, probably depending on where we are in terms of the numbers, we might insist on, and again, we're waiting for government sort of regulations on this and advice as to whether we insist that you show us that you've got a double vax. And if we really wanted to add an extra safety dimension, we could say, please make sure the night before you sent your lateral flow test results in. So that's possible to do as well. Again, in terms of when we used to have a problem with food, you can make sure that everybody has their own spoon. So if it's like a buffet style or the food is brought to you, everybody has their own spoon. So there's no chance of it being cross-contaminated. So there's lots of things you can do. And ultimately, of course, you can always restrict numbers. So there's a free flow of people in and out of the place. So lots of things you can do. And that's why with smaller numbers, you can manage it much easier in terms of flow of traffic and ventilation and making sure the cutlery and everything is all sorted and plenty of sanitizers and so we can wash your hands as well. So all the usual precautions, really. And remember,
I mean, what would be quite interesting to know is at a commercial level, what is the most damaging part from the pandemic in terms of an event. I'm sort of guessing that the most damaging part is that happened already, which is that you couldn't do the events. But now that you can do the events, doesn't look like there's much that's actually going to be at a cost, because in some ways you've got the bit that you might have difficulty before, which is to try and fill up places or to do more marketing. Probably requires less marketing now because there's a pent-up demand. So are you finding that in some ways getting the business is a lot easier, and even the rolling out of it, it's just the cost is probably pretty much the same. It's just the logistics are a little bit more, you have to just go back to the drawing board to just manage the logistics on the day in a way that's actually more clean cut to meet with the current government guidelines or anything that could actually be an issue. Is that pretty much it? Because I can't see anything
so
commercially as a negative at the moment for in the events industry.
I think a couple of things. You've got to first, and by the way, Lakhi, sorry, I'm going to dash on in a couple of minutes if that's okay. We've got a filming slot to do.
Okay, no problem.
But let me finish with a couple of things. So the first thing you've got to do is plan for every eventuality. So just like in business, think about what could go wrong, both in your control, but what could go wrong outside of your control. So just think about regulation, think about a restriction on numbers. What would you then do? How do your numbers then stack up with that? And what things have you got ready to put in place depending on the level of restriction? We know what those look like, so you can plan for them. So how will the floor space look like if you're reduced by 20%, 30%, 40%? If you reduce by 20, 30, 40%, how does that hit your income streams? Then make sure the suppliers are part of the solution in terms of flexibility and movement and delivering additional services. And I think the third one is it's about entrepreneurship. You can either sit at home and not do anything and just let the world pass by you, or you get up and do something and say, you know something, I'm going to make the best of this. And if you go in with a positive attitude, I think you'll be fine. But as a backdrop against all business, you plan for the worst and hopefully enjoy the best.
Okay, I mean, so there is, I suppose, a cost impact because you've got to be a lot more measured in terms of social distancing, I suppose, is probably the major issue. And even though at a social distancing level, it's probably the self-regulation, there's a bit of a balance between self-regulation and protocols that people probably expect. And I suppose that getting that balance just right, so it's commercially viable, and it's also an experience that people can can actually enjoy without too much restriction. That's probably the biggest point, isn't it? Trying to get it just right.
Yeah, and luckily, of course, in case I forget, I'm going to come and see you in a couple of weeks, not next week, the week after. So I'll drop you a call and let's hook up and see the world that we're still connecting, you and me.
Fantastic. Well, I think you've got to go now as well. So I appreciate all your time, Ninder Singh. Ninder Singh is available another 4 weeks from now. We'll have another very exciting topic, I'm sure. And thank you again very much for your time, and best of luck with all the events. And we look forward to working with you, helping with your promotion. And not that you will need any help with your contact base, but we're happy to help and assist in anything that you're doing and your endeavors. Okay.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you again, and have a great session. You're filming as well.
Yeah,
now.
filming.
Thank you.
We're just going to go and film some entrepreneurs and their tips for budding entrepreneurs, their tips on recruiting talent, and their tips on planning for the future. So we're doing a string of them now this afternoon.
Well, pleasure again to have you on the show as always, and really appreciate your time, and hope everything goes well, and hope everything stays in very good stead for you.
Cheers.
Okay, guys, everybody, thank you very much. Properly
Thanks,
Quick signing out. Bye for now. Okay, I'm just signing out.